What's up, people? Welcome to a brand new and very special edition of Wrestle Update. I'm your host, Dylan Fox, as always joined by Nello de Angelis, and we have a very, very special episode. They're all special in their own way, but this time we have our very first interview live on Wrestle Update. And I will admit, I will give credit, I will give hype where he deserves it. This was a Nello special here. This was his idea, and he came through big. He went live in the trenches, as he's known to do. We've seen him go out to shows before in his neck of the woods, but now we have a really cool thing that's happening here. One of the shows he went to was for a brand new deathmatch company, and obviously, where would that be? Arizona Deathmatch Company. They had their first ever show, Death in the Desert 2025. It took place just over a month and a half ago. It's live on YouTube. Go to the Cage Match page on there. You'll see the link to it. You can watch an entire tournament that they had here, which I watched myself before the show. And we, today on the show, have the promoter of AZ Deathmatch, James. How are you doing, my friend? Welcome to Wrestle Update.
Hey, I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah,
I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on with us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to talk, see what you guys got for me, and talk more about our show or company or myself or whatever you want to talk about. So,
yeah,
sorry, Dylan.
No, I was literally about to throw it to you. I was just going to say, hey, like, I want to be the point guard here today. Nello, I know you were super hyped to do the show, and I'm hyped as well. I've got plenty of questions of my own. It's going to be a full court press here. I don't know why I keep using basketball references today. I think I'm just jazzed up over the Grizzlies that have been on a hot streak lately, and John's coming back. So I'm very basketball centric right now. But nevertheless, I want to pass it to you, Nello. I want you to get this show on the road here.
Yeah, James, let's talk a little bit, about yourself first,
Sure.
your history with wrestling. So like, how did you first get into pro wrestling?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of like a late bloomer, I guess you call it, to wrestling. I knew a little bit and had some friends in grade school and that would talk about it, and I was like, isn't that fake, kind of thing. It wasn't until I was probably 18 or 19 that I started actually getting into like watching, WWE and that kind of thing. And so like I said, a little later, but at this point now I'm 37, so I've been watching it for almost 20 years. So I'd say that's pretty well seasoned at this point. But yeah, and watching that, going back and watching, ECW and that kind of stuff is where the like deathmatch love came from. But yeah, just started getting into it. A couple of friends, and we even did backyard wrestling for a little bit with nothing fancy, just a couple of friends and my brother and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just kind of progressed from there into what it is today. So,
What was your backyard name?
It was the Macho Masochist. That was my nickname. And it was just my normal, like, James Davis is my actual name. So yeah, I didn't have like a cool, like fake name. So
I will say this.
Pretty cool nickname.
Yeah. I will say this, James. I've used that same nickname, just not in wrestling before. So I think you had a good idea there. Hey,
excellent.
When I trained, let me tell you something. If you think that's bad, my original wrestling name was so much worse than that. It was Dynamite Dylan. My partner was Manic Micah. Our tag team name was the Dymatics. And this is literally, I mean, you got to understand, I was 13 years old when I trained, so I had no concept of what was cool in 2005. We were just guys trying to make it, kids trying to make it. So
right.
Your name was way better than mine, I will say. In your back, yeah, and I actually trained with that. That was my actual name. See, you just say it was a backyard name. Yeah. See, now you get the experience of being a backyard wrestler, and you can really do whatever you want there. And me and Nello have talked about that on the show before. With 2K wrestling, we looked at in the past, and that stuff I used to watch on YouTube all the time, way back in the day. But that's really cool that you got to start late. I think that's such a unique experience because I've joked about this before, and I don't want to step on Nello's toes here too much here, but I've always said, like, wrestling, it's one of those things, and especially where I'm from Memphis, I'm from the South. I would joke about this because people later on, maybe not at the time, but especially 10, 20 years later, they'd say, man, why the hell did you watch WCW? That company sucked. And I was like, I didn't choose wrestling. I didn't choose WCW. It shows me. I'm from the South. It's just happened that way. And I feel like that is how it is with a lot of people, though, is that wrestling kind of chooses you and you just grow with it. But I love that you took a different path to it and you got to kind of jump in at a unique time.
Right. Yeah, I've always thought that with anything. I'm a big movie fan as well, video games, all that kind of stuff. And I'm old. Like I said, I'm 37, but certain things you look back and it's easy, like you were saying about, oh, why would you watch WCW? It sucked. Like, yeah, when you're looking at it now, you can look at it as an entire body of work. But when it's happening and you're there, you're seeing it week by week. You can't say that. Like one of my favorite ones to talk about is like Friday the 13th franchise. It's like, yeah, well, when you look back and say, oh, there's 10 movies, 11 movies, whatever, this and this one doesn't go to the next one. But it's like, well, yeah, but when it came out, there wasn't all these other movies after it. So it's kind of like wrestling like that, where oh, I'm watching Raw in this time frame. You didn't know, like, oh, this is the Attitude Era. This is where it's going to get really good. This is where everyone's going to split. Everyone's going to choose one side or the other. Like it's happening. It's hard to realize you're in that moment when it's happening. But yeah, I feel you.
So what was kind of what drew you then? Like, what was the first show that really was like, hey, this stuff is actually cool?
A buddy of mine just kind of one day was like, hey, have you checked out wrestling? And I don't know why. And we I think it was right around like the Raw 10th anniversary, or it had to be 15, something like that. Yeah. And, some kind of, anniversary special. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then watching older stuff, WrestleMania was around that time that was, going to come out, and we just kind of like fell into it. And then you're going down the rabbit hole of, again, you got, 20, I'm trying to remember, I think it was WrestleMania 24, so 20 something WrestleManias to catch up on, and SummerSlams and Royal Rumbles and all this stuff and championship histories, that it was just a cool like rabbit hole to go down into, that we were, big into comic books, we're big into video games, we're big into action figures, and the anime, whatever at the time. And it was like, okay, everything kind of fizzles out. And then you're like, oh wait, here's this, a new thing for me to learn about and obsess over and argue with people online about who's better or what. But yeah. And so it was just watching, previous WrestleManias and watching kind of the evolution. I always thought was kind of fun of watching WrestleMania 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to however many. And then you start to get into like the Attitude Era and the little more extreme stuff in that, and that kind of, WWE, WWF, hardcore title era stuff, was really fascinating to me. And I'm like, oh shit, that guy's bleeding. Like, oh, damn, that's cool, and then like, oh, well, check out this thing called ECW and then CZW. And then it just, really snowballed from there. So yeah, that was kind of where I came into it. But yeah, it was just something new, something different. We were not, I've never been in my life a sports person. So football, basketball, baseball, I don't care. I can watch them if somebody wants to watch it, but I've never really been a big fan. And, this, for whatever reason, like caught my eye. I'm like, damn, if people were doing more German suplexes, I'd watch football, but
very rare does that happen.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, we talked about ECW, which I feel like is the gateway drug, along with FMW, to more deathmatch centric stuff. And then you mentioned CZW as well. So like, what was your kind of descent down into the deathmatch world like?
For sure, yeah. It was, watching. So it was probably, WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call it at the time, the hardcore title. I always thought that was really cool looking, for one. And just, kind of like chaotic. There was like funny stuff, and then as well as like actual kind of hardcore matches. And then, like going to ECW or watching ECW, going to ECW from WWE and being like, wow, these are a little more intense. Like, oh, these dudes are, falling out of the ring onto concrete. Oh, that dude just went through a barbed wire table. Like, that's crazy. Oh, those dudes just put that guy through a flaming table. And then from there it was like, oh, well, you like that? Like, check out these two guys, Zandig and Nick Mondo jumping off the roof and, falling through these tables covered in light tubes and shit. And I'm just like, what? Like, hold on. Like, this is, I didn't even like understand that like independent wrestling existed at the time. I was like, it's just big ones, and so that was, probably a lot of people, I would guess, that was like an opening the door moment for them, but the weed whacker spot, like Nick Mondo, I absolutely love.
Yeah,
he's a really cool dude. I actually had dinner with him one time and got to talk to him for a while, so he's really cool. And but yeah, so a lot of his stuff. And that kind of, he himself kind of fascinated me. I don't know if we'll get into that more of, certain people, but just his very short but pretty hardcore career, really, really fascinated me. And so then it just kind of went from there. And back when I got into it, not that, like I'm talking 2007, 8-ish, CZW had already been well established and around for a while. So, I wasn't around for the early days of that, but as far back as I remember, it was like, when I started looking into it, CZW, IWA Mid-South, Deep South, and, maybe IWA East Coast. And that was really it. There was a few other smaller ones that I found through DVDs and things like that, but it wasn't like now where you've got like, GCW and RPW and No Holds Barred ICW and all these other companies, ICW in Milwaukee and that are just like deathmatch, and that was, a big inspiration of doing my own thing. But yeah, so I love to see that it's blown up, and lots of people are really liking deathmatch stuff because I absolutely love it. So
Same. Yeah, it feels like, during the pandemic, especially, deathmatch was like the number one type of wrestling that was running then, and it really blew up through like, your Murdochs and your Colognes and that kind of rivalry,
Right.
climaxing and stuff like that. So totally agree. And the ascent of deathmatch to something like Nick Gage on AEW television doing light tubes
Right.
of Chris Jericho, it's like it really did break into the mainstream, which is awesome. So, okay, one more thing for you before we jump into the promotion. Do you have a favorite death match and a favorite death match show?
Oh man, I'd say if I had to pick one, I always want to. Anytime anybody asks me a favorite anything, I want to be like, well, here's my top 3, here's my top 5, something like that. It's so hard to pick one, but just off the top of my head, I think Abdullah Kobayashi versus Drake Younger. I don't remember when it was. I'd have to look it up, but it was in Japan. It's the one where Kobayashi sticks the needles through Drake's neck. And they have the bed of nails and all kinds of crazy shit in that match. And that was just like oh wow, like elevation of the death match. Like, this isn't just broken light tubes and tacks and stuff. Like, these dudes were going crazy. I absolutely love Abdullah Kobayashi. He's the coolest. Now that I got to hang out with him, he's the coolest dude in the world. But before that, he was just like, he's my favorite of all time. And so a lot of matches that I love have him engage a Tournament of Death with the Kenzans in his head. Like, fucking love that. Deathmatch show. Maybe Tournament of Death 8. I think just so many good matches in that one. Masters of Pain, I think it's the first one with Kasai. It was really good. And yeah, there's so many that are good across the board. And now, I mean, they're putting off, ICW and GCW are putting off these shows that are just fucking fantastic, like monthly or every couple months, and you're like, oh man, like, this isn't like oh yeah, I remember that one show from 10 years ago. Like, no, remember all those shows from last year. It's crazy how they're doing that, but there's a lot more people, a lot more fans. So yeah,
that is awesome. I thought I knew I had like a deep knowledge of deathmatch wrestling, and here you are blowing my mind. I'm like Googling these cage match links now, and writing them down so I can watch it for later. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So, all right. So, we've talked about you and stuff. So thank you for sharing about yourself. And now I would love to sort of center things around Arizona Deathmatch Company and y'all's first event, Death in the Desert. So what was the catalyst for putting on your own show and starting your own promotion?
Not to like be a downer, but just kind of, feeling drifting through life, like just like I said, I'm 37 and I'm like, well, I don't fucking do anything, haven't done anything, great, or fancy or memorable with my life, and I, feel like I'm getting older in this, and I like I said, I'm big into movies, and I constantly I'm like, oh, I want to make a movie, but it's so hard to just get the motivation and to get people. There's a lot of stuff involved in that, and so another thing I just wanted to do was like put on a wrestling show, and so that kind of became a reality when I started talking to people. Neil Diamond Cutter is a very, very good friend of mine, and Michael Kruger as well. And Michael Kruger lives here in Arizona, so I kind of talked to them and got their opinions on certain things, and I was like, you know what, I think we're gonna do it. Like, let's do it. If we do it once, cool. If we do it every year, or if we do multiple shows a year, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds on that, but yeah. So that was kind of the thing, and I had some money from family that were nice enough to help me out. And like, hey, yeah, you got a dream, you want to do this? Like, absolutely. So that helped a bit to get going, because it costs a lot to put on a wrestling show. I have a lot of respect for any promoter that does it, because holy shit, so
with deathmatch too, then it's like you're having to buy weapons and all sorts of,
right.
For the lack of a better term, fuckery,
Yep.
for the show that you otherwise wouldn't need on a more traditional pro wrestling event.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much more that goes into them too. And anyone that tells you, or excuse me, anyone that builds weapons will tell you, like, we got there and I stupidly assumed that, that was a big lesson I learned. Sorry to digress, but was like, don't assume anyone is going to be there for you. I had some of my great friends show up and help out beyond what, I expected. And, we still like, okay, we got all this stuff back here. And then it was like, shit, who's going to put the barbed wire on this door? Like, we need to find somebody, so it wasn't even just amassing the things, getting them together. It was, we gotta, tape things and nail things together, open all these tacks and put them in that pit, little stuff like that you don't think of. And it's just, it's a lot, sticking forks and stuff and toothpicks and things and skewers and things and whatever. So, that's a nightmare, but yeah, it all went well. But yeah, that was a good lesson for the future. And like I said, massive respect to anyone that puts on these type of shows, because it is, like you said, another facet of it to think about. Normally it might be like, oh yeah, we got a couple chairs, or if they're going to get a little hardcore there. But yeah, when it's like, oh yeah, we need to trim some barbed wire and tape it or stick it to the door somehow and build these little contraptions, it's a lot more.
And from what you're saying, it just seems like you really brought it, because a normal show, you could have ran a normal show if you chose to, but you specifically aimed to make this whole company and this show as a deathmatch show.
Yeah.
And was that just built out of your heart? It's like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is my preferred style of wrestling. Yeah,
absolutely. I still keep up with WWE and AEW a little bit, just like what's going on, who's this, but I don't watch it as religiously as I used to. I do watch deathmatch as religiously as I possibly can, with a wife and a kid and and all that. So those I try to keep up with as much as possible, and because that's what I like. I love I love deathmatch wrestling. I love it, and I like regular wrestling too. I love regular wrestling, but that was never like an idea or anything. It wasn't to just put on a wrestling show. I wanted to put on a deathmatch show for several reasons. One, except because I love that. Two, it's something that's never really been here. There are some. There used to be. I guess they just came back. I saw on Facebook. There's a company in Tucson called High Impact Wrestling (HIW) that did like a couple kind of deathmatch tournaments, and I've seen them on YouTube and like years and years ago. But there's really not been much. And even when like GCW has come to Phoenix a couple times, I'm like, are we gonna do a death match from here? Like, and they really don't. They do some doors and chairs and whatever, but never really anything like that. And so I just kind of thought, I'm not in it for the money at all. So there was no interest in like, I want to start this wrestling company to make as much money as possible, because it'd be hard in Arizona. There's a ton of wrestling companies here and they're all fantastic in their own way. But yeah, it's just kind of like a niche thing of, there are no deathmatch companies here. There are hardly any death matches. There's hardly any hardcore stuff here. And so, why not capitalize on that and in a way that, a loving way, as opposed to like a monetary way. I don't want to tell you how much I spent at the show and how much we didn't make back, but it was significant. And it doesn't bother me, because like I said, I did it out of love. I made money, in a way to pay the money back that I owed, and that's all I wanted to do. I did not look at it from a like, oh, I'm going to do this because people will pay me and I'll get rich off of putting on wrestling shows, deathmatch shows, whatever. One of the promoters, I talked to a bunch of people before I did it, some really good promoters. Ryan from Prescott, he was a really good, instrumental in giving me a lot of information, and some other people. He somebody told me, I don't remember who it was, it's like the best way to make or to have $1 million after putting on a wrestling show is to start with $2 million. And that kind of like resonated to me. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how anybody makes money off of wrestling shows, like other than the wrestlers, but even then, a lot of them.
Yeah, even then, it's not exactly that easy as you might think.
Right. And I just, I looked at it, and it's kind of like I said, we're not going to do monthly shows, unless somehow it blew up into that. But you know what, putting on like one really cool show a year or a couple of shows a year or something like that I have to, work outside of that. Like, what else am I really spending money on? Why not? Let's do it. For the fans, why we're doing deathmatch, Arizona Deathmatch Company. It's death matches. We're not just doing another wrestling company trying to capitalize on stuff. So
yeah, I mean, sorry, I was just gonna say, like Mark Briscoe, right? For the love of the game. That's
right.
Exactly what he would say.
Yep.
And, for kind of the experience and perspective of like an Arizona fan, if you want to see deathmatch, you either got to fly across the country to the East Coast or drive over to LA to catch Circle 6 or 7, which, those shows, I've been to a lot of them. I love the wrestlers on them. There's been some good matches, but not always the best energy.
Right.
Like there are fights at the shows, there's absolutely no real seating chart for the people who buy seats. So, there's always people in your seats, shit like that. Anyway, I'm not going to get too into it, but which is to say that we don't have the best selection out here. Right.
Yep.
And so, you talked about the challenges of not only putting on a pro wrestling show, or actually, Dylan, you wanted to say something as well. Why don't you go into that before I get to this question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a little bit because it's something I had thought about and I'd written down to ask you because, the name of the company it has Arizona right in the name. And we've seen pockets all over the country, whether it's like, in the past where back in those days you were talking about with CZW, Philadelphia was like everybody's dream, like every person's dream. Like if you could get there, Ring of Honor's there, CZW's there,
right?
Like Chikara's around there, like all of that stuff around then. That was like a whole big deal. Then later on, you have stuff with Florida, like Nello said, the West Coast has a great scene right now. Even Texas, has a lot of companies there. And I was just gonna ask, like, do you see yourself in AZ Deathmatch and maybe just indies in general there? Because you mentioned, there are a lot of companies in the area. do you think that there could be it could grow into sort of a rival, so to speak, of the West Coast and Texas scenes, with Arizona having its own identity? Or do you think you could pull it off to where maybe Texas and Cali could kind of work with you guys and you could kind of formulate the best of both worlds between those areas?
Yeah, that's ideally what I would like, is I don't like to choose sides on stuff. That's a real hot one on all the Facebook groups, ICW, No Holds Barred, or GCW, like why take sides, like why can't I just watch and enjoy both? I understand there's all kinds of bullshit in politics and, this and that behind the scenes. As a fan, that shouldn't play into anything for me. Like, I should just say, hey, the wrestlers I like are on this card. I'm going to watch the show. I don't give a shit who puts it on. And so that's how I feel, and why one of the reasons was Arizona Deathmatch Company was, what if we do a show outside of Arizona? I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for that. But I didn't want to, do like West Coast wrestling or something like that feels like it's going to step on somebody else's toes, because I want Crimson Crown Wrestling to know like they've got their stuff there. I want, Texas wrestling companies to know they've got their thing there. I'm not, trying to come for them or anything like that. No, I want our little slice of wrestling here, and I want it to be fruitful for everyone. I had several people come up to me at our show and say things, like, oh, this was amazing. This was really cool. The turnout, blah, blah, blah. Like, what if other people start doing that? What if other companies, here start doing death matches? I'm like, I will be there. I'll be the front row for them. I didn't invent death matches. I didn't invent a death match, centric company. I have no claim to that, nor do I want to have a claim to that. I want everyone to watch death matches and like death matches as much as I do, and have as many as they can. So that's how I feel about that. Is I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I'm a rival to anything. No, I don't want to be rivals to anyone. I want everyone to do their shit, do their shows, and the fans win. That's all that's important to me. And I feel, maybe that's kind of cheesy to say, but like I feel like as a fan, that's what I did. I was a fan first, and then, became a promoter. I've only done one show, but I promoted it. And I know there's a lot of people that would call me a mark, or, smark, or whatever you want to call it. And you know what? Like, I guess, but I didn't put on this show for me. I didn't put on this show for this person or this person. I put it on for the people. And that's all I want. I want to share my love of deathmatch wrestling with other people. And I don't care who I book. I don't care who I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to, fight with other companies over territory or over certain wrestlers or whatever. Like, I think it's so stupid. I understand a wrestler having loyalty to a company for one reason or another, but when it comes to all this like Facebook drama, I call it, I don't know how real life it is, but this person called the cops on this, trying to get this show shut down. It's like, why, man? Like, why are you trying to sabotage other companies? I get if you have beef with somebody and this person hates this person, whatever. It's like, why can't you just exist in your own thing? Worry about your shit. That's all I want to do. I want to worry about my shit. I want to worry about my wrestling company, and that's it. I don't care who goes. I don't care who else is doing a show on the same day or whatnot. Man, just exist and let people have options to watch things.
Oh yeah. So you talked about, the challenge of putting on a wrestling show, and then there's the additional challenge of putting on a deathmatch show. And then you decided to take it a step further and put on not a deathmatch show, but a deathmatch tournament. What was the inspiration to put on a tournament versus, a more traditional show like a RPW or ICW, etc.?
Sure. I absolutely love deathmatch tournaments. I just think it's such a cool concept. It's a cool like endurance, spectacle to see somebody go from the first round to the second round to the finals and win it all. That was my first exposure to actual deathmatch was Tournament of Death 13. I had gone, if you guys remember, there was this Extreme Reunion company that turned into something else. I don't remember what it was, Extreme something. But anyways, they put on the show in 2012 in Philadelphia, and it was kind of billed as like an ECW reunion. And then they were like, "Oh no, it's not that. We're a new company and going forward." And so I went to that show and met a couple really cool people there, and friends, and we stayed friends and talked. And then it was like, "Hey, how about we go to Tournament of Death? Jun Kasai is going to be there. They're bringing BJW as the BJW Freedoms." Whichever one versus CCW basically. And so for the first real deathmatch show I went to was that one. And like here I got to see Takeda, Jaki Numazawa, Jun Kasai, Masada, Matt Tremont, Danny Havoc, Lucky 13, and some other people. And it was just like, holy shit, like that was an experience. We met up, hung out outside, did a little tailgating, just until the show, and then watched the show, and it was just I fucking loved it. And so we did that every year for several years, and the same kind of thing. And I ended up going to Tournament of Survival one year, Tournament of Survival 2, and so then family stuff and money started to get in the way that I can't afford a trip to New Jersey or Delaware or Philadelphia, wherever it was going to be. I can't afford to take off time from work, family stuff, all of that. And I was like, all right, like I'll just wait for stuff out here. And then, thought, why not do my own? But sorry, back to your question, the tournament thing. It's just that's where I kind of fell in love with the tournaments. But the real thought behind it was, and a lot of people did say that, like, why didn't you do like a regular show first? Why did you go? Because I don't want to say I don't know, because I fully plan to do more shows, but I didn't know if I was going to continue. I didn't know if this was going to be a one and done, or if we were going to keep going or what. And so I wanted to just go all out. That's why I fucking flew in Abdullah Kobayashi. That's why I, got Masada. That's why I got, all these people that I think are some of the absolute best around, and got them to be at our show. Because I didn't know at the time if we were going to do more, but from the support and the reception we got from it, I think we're definitely going to do more. So, yeah. So the tournament was kind of just like, what if we do it once, go big or go home, go whatever, thing you want to call it like that. So yeah, we just went all out and did a tournament.
Sweet. Yeah. You mentioned some of the competitors. What was your approach and strategy to creating the tournament field?
It was really, I tried to get a little bit of everything. Obviously, us being on this side of the country, there's a couple people like Sage Sin and JD Horror that are, more popular over here than other places. Michael Kruger, like I said, is a good friend of mine, and he's local here. So obviously, it was like, and he's fantastic. I'll take a second to Michael Kruger he's a big dude. He moves great. He is fucking great. I love that dude, and I just don't know why he doesn't get used more, and I wish he would, because he's great. But anyway, so he was obviously going to be in it. Neil, like I said, very, very good friend of mine, and he's retiring this year. I was like, hey, let's do a tournament. You want to be in it? Okay, cool. He was, perfectly happy just being, kind of my behind the scenes, and helping me talk to people and how to, what to talk to people about and what to ask and things to look for. And he was like, oh, I'll be in it. Absolutely. Masada, I think, is absolutely the best American deathmatch wrestler in history. Whether that's a hot take or not, I fucking love Masada. He's amazing. Abdullah Kobayashi is my all-time favorite. I really didn't think that, that was like a pipe dream kind of thing. And one of my buddies, actually one of the ones I met in Philadelphia at that Extreme Reunion show, he is his name's Jeff. He does Dad Dyes It, the tie-dye company, and that, I've been supportive of him since day one on that, and it's blown up. I mean, he's had people all over GCW, all over every show, RPW, ICW, even I think maybe I'm wrong, but AEW. You know, like he's had all these people wearing his stuff. And one of the GCW shows, they had Abdullah Kobayashi, and he, you know, got him like a tie-dye thing that he still wears from time to time. And so he was like, hey, you know, I still talk to him. Like, do you want me to run it by him? And I was like, sure, dude. Like, I guess, you know, it didn't even cross my mind. Like, why would I, starting out, no connections, no anything, like, why would I approach, you know, one of the, in my mind, the fucking best of all time to you know, be in my little tournament in Arizona? And he talked to him, and Kobayashi messaged me and was like, yeah, I'm down. I was like, let's go, you know. So we had Nick Gage for a little while, and I know Nick's going through some stuff, and so, you know, we had to kind of make a tough decision there of to cut him. But I hear he's back out and doing good now. So all the love to Nick Gage. Like, I hope to have him at a show in the future. And then, you know, everyone else in the show just kind of came together. We got Chuck, you know, to represent kind of the Midwest, hardcore from East Coast, you know, Masada in Texas, and like I said, just the name, the prominence, and Sage Sin. You know, I love Sage Sin. I've seen her several times, and I just thought it would be cool to have a girl. She was actually one of the original people I reached out to, and she didn't like respond to me for a couple months, so we ended up going with other people, and then she finally responded, and I was like, shit, I already, you know, filled up the brackets, you know, and then all the stuff with Gage started happening, and so I was like, you know what, like, let's switch him out. So that was, like I said, a kind of a tough decision, but you know, we got Sage, and she was fantastic. So yeah, like I said, it just a little bit of, you know, I can't think of the word providence or whatever, of, you know, people like Masada and Kobayashi who have been doing it forever. Neil, you know, has been doing it for a good amount of time and is retiring and is a smaller guy. You've got, you know, Michael Kruger, who's a fucking monster. You know, you got Chuck, who's, you know, got a certain very cool look about him. You know, hardcore, same kind of thing. And, you know, there's just, I wanted a representation of not only people from the country, you know, across the country, but of, you know, kind of all walks of life type of thing. So
it was a great time to get Sage too, because that was right around Halloween when the show happened. Right.
And she had just come back to, you know, the Sage Sin kind of character. You know, so that was cool. Not that I wouldn't have, you know, had her anyways, but you know, that was the Pumpkin Queen, you know, like, I love that. That's all the times I've seen her has been that. So
see, in my experience, that can be kind of tricky though, from a promoter perspective, in terms of, because I knew a guy that did a vampire gimmick, and anytime Halloween came around, he was like, I can't go, like, I have to go over. This is my time. Like,
right.
Then one time, as a joke, I pitched that my gimmick should be a holiday gimmick. Like, I just every holiday I could never lose, because
right. Hey, that's a great one.
But I did want to say something too about Kobayashi, because I think you know, Nello and me both have a lot of respect and love and history for him. One thing that really stood out to me, and I'll kind of give you the way to kind of speak on this a little bit more, as much as you would like. Something that stood out to me during the show, during the main event, after he had already been eliminated, mind you, you could see him pull up a chair to watch the main event just on his own. He didn't try to big time anybody or go backstage. He actually wanted to see what was going on. That really spoke to me a lot about him. So just a little bit about Kobayashi, a little bit more in depth. How cool was that working with him, man?
Yeah. He to speak on that real quick, I was kind of sitting almost over by the commentary table. I was like in the back row. And I looked over and I saw him, and I kind of like over to JD and Hardcore were on commentary, and I was like, yo, I'm like, check it out, like Kobayashi's front row watching. And then they even mentioned on commentary, he's like, I don't know if you noticed, but Abdullah Kobayashi is over there. So that was kind of cool to see. I mean, he has got massive respect for both Neil and Masada. You know, so it was really cool to see him out there. But yeah, he's such a cool dude. You know, he speaks a little bit of English, but not great. And you know, so there was a little bit of a language barrier, but enough to, you know, I'm like, what, like, hungry? Okay, let's get food. And like that was it. And he'd show me pictures, or we'd talk, and we did a bunch of stuff. There's I think I posted some pictures with him. We went to Goldfield Ghost Town in Apache Junction. That's like an Old West ghost town kind of thing, and we did like an old timey photo, me, him, Hardcore, and Neil, and like an Old West photo. That was really fun. And then him and Neil and I went to that Odyssey Aquarium and looked at a bunch of fish and stuff. I took him shooting. He'd never shot a gun before, so that was a cool experience. That I have that video on our YouTube, the Arizona Deathmatch, of him shooting stuff. So he enjoyed that, and it was really cool to sit there and like I said, and there was one point, I have a picture, maybe I'll post it somewhere, but it was in the motel room. I was sitting in the corner, and it was just him and Masada. It was the first time they had seen each other. I think he said like 10 years. And Kobayashi's just sitting on the bed, and Masada's in a chair, and I just sat there and watched them talk and listen to them talk for like half an hour. Just reminiscing and talking about what they've been up to and all this. I was like, this is fucking cool. This is some cool, like, just being there, like fly on the wall type of stuff. But yeah, he's super, super nice, super fun. I'll tell you a funny thing. We went to IHOP for breakfast, him, Kobayashi, Neil, and myself. And we were sitting at the table, and we were talking about, like, Neil and him were talking about stuff for their match. And he was talking about the fork. Kobayashi does that fork every once in a while, or he gets stuck in his head, and, kind of funny gimmick. And so I was like, yeah, we'll get you a fork, don't worry. So we get in the car, and he's in the passenger seat, I'm in the front seat, Neil's in the back. And we're like turn the car on, getting ready. And he's just like, and I apologize, I can't not do the voice. I don't mean it to be, disrespectful, but he's just like, oh, and I look, and he pulls out a fork, and he's like, hey, take a fork. And I'm like, you just stole a fork from IHOP to use for his match tomorrow. Like, okay, yes. Man, like, that's fucking hilarious. So we cracked up laughing, and it was just little shit like that. He's like amazed by everything, so it's just so cool to show him everything, because he's never even been to this side of the country. Every time he's been here has been Tournament of Death or GCW and ICW. I think the furthest west he's got was Chicago, I believe. Wow. So he's never been over here. So the desert aesthetic was really cool for him. He liked it a lot. He likes the cowboy stuff, everything, and so we had a lot of fun just showing him around and showing him stuff. So yeah, he was just cool, and I got to hang out with him a lot. He came in a little early and left a little later because he wanted to have more of an experience. I'm like, yeah, let's make it worth it, dude, because you're coming a long ways. We're gonna see some stuff. So yeah,
so cool.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I had a couple fun interactions with Kobayashi as well. Just because, so he sat next to me when he came to watch the finals, which was really cool.
Oh, cool.
And but during the show, at one point he brings Neil over outside of the ring right in front of me and my friends, and Kobayashi breaks a real fucking beer bottle and then just starts chewing it. And then he walks up to me and gets right in my face and then spits all the fucking.
Oh, is that you? That's funny.
Yeah, that was me. So, and like, dude, they have me on camera and everything in the show, And I was just like, dude, that is like, that alone, I was like, wow, day fulfilled. And then after the match, he's like walking outside and I'm smoking and he like smells it and he's like, marijuana. And I was like, yeah, this dude is bleeding so much. And I literally, those two interactions alone, I was like, man, like, because Kobayashi is also one of my all-time favorites. And so to have those interactions, I was like, as a fan, I'm like, that's the best you can really hope for. Right. And also, like, I think in terms of marketing, because when I first heard about your company, it was a GCW show, like, God, it was like almost a year before the actual event. I remember you guys started marketing really far out. And so, you get a flyer and it's Arizona Deathmatch Company and it's like, okay, cool. But like, how serious is this going to be? And
Right.
then the first wrestler that you announce is Abdullah Kobayashi. And as a fan, that made me take you seriously from the very beginning, because
Right.
not only was that a very clear investment financially that you made, but like as a fan, like the knowledge, the passion, like I'm going to bring this guy over. Like that's some meaningful shit, like a name to have in your tournament. Right.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really brilliant first name. Um, and you also mentioned Nick Gage, who was originally announced for the show. He's like arguably the biggest or second biggest name on the show alongside Kobayashi. So, when he did drop the show, what was that like for you as a first time promoter? And, how did you sort of pivot?
Yeah, I don't want to get into, like, I'll talk about it. I don't want to get into like the specifics. But I will say it was our decision, to do it, and just because, from everything I was seeing and hearing and talking to people that are, more in the know than I was, again, being, out of this loop. I'm not, an insider. I'm not a whatever. It was just like, hey, this might be an issue. And I just I couldn't take that risk. It sucks to say, because I have massive respect for Nick Gage. He's fantastic. I've seen him live several times. I've met him. He's one of the coolest fucking dudes. He's super nice. He cares about the fans. He does it for all of us, and does, crazy shit. And so it was very tough for me to make that decision to replace him. And so it sucked, and it was hard, because I know that a lot of people wanted to see Gage. He has that. Not only has he been doing this for 26 years at this point, but he was, like you said, he was on AEW once. He so people that are even casual fans, would be like, oh, if you. I didn't want to market it like that, but if somebody wanted to, they could be like, as seen on AEW, like, and get that gimmick out of it, but I'm like, anyone that knows Deathmatch knows Nick Gage, so they're going to be psyched for it. Anyone that might not know it but recognize his name or anything like that will be there. So that was hard, but it was nice, because I, no shade to him, but I had reached out to Sage Sin before him. And I was like, damn, I kind of wanted her, because she's super nice. I've met her several times and seen her, and I thought it would be cool to have, a woman on the show. And so, when all that happened, she had just recently messaged me, and I was like, you know what, like, give me a second, like, let me figure some stuff out, and it just ended up working out like that. And like I said, there's no ill will. I feel terrible that I had to make that decision, but I now that I see what transpired in the time afterwards, like, I'm glad I made that decision, but I'm glad, more importantly, that Nick got help, and he's getting help, and seems to be doing a lot better. And like I said, I would absolutely love to have him on any show we do in the future, because he's the king of this shit, like, he's Nick fucking Gage, so yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. Very well said. Did you ever consider using the term "rolling with the punches"? Give us an hour or something like that when announcing the replacement. Going
No.
ICW, no holds barred with it.
I knew I definitely needed more than an hour. That was that was something that, like, hopefully, I'll work on in the future and have that option. But a couple people had told me that, and it was right around the time that the King of the Kill happened, and Nick couldn't make that, and I think they got Mickey Knuckles to replace him. And it was a quick last minute thing, and I was like, I'm new to this. I don't have a well of people that I can dip into that know me, that trust me, that are, hey, I need you to drive 9 hours overnight real quick, on 12 hours notice, to be in my show. I don't have that luxury. So if somebody just didn't show up, to the show, doesn't matter who it is, not even saying, Gage, like if just somebody didn't show up, I had a couple backup people, but nobody as significant, no, I don't mean it that bad to anyone else, but I didn't have another Nick Gage to replace. I didn't have another Masada or Kobayashi or anything to replace, but I did have, some backup people. So, but as we go forward, I would like to think that, let's say I'm doing a show and I don't have JD Horror. JD Horror was fucking great, and he gave me a lot of good advice because he also promotes shows in California. So he had a lot of, insight into that as well as, the wrestling aspect of it. And so, I'd like to think that, like, hey, man, like, something happened, can you get here? Because he lives in California. It's a, whatever it is, 8-hour drive, 6-hour drive, 10-hour drive, something like that. I like to hope that, if he's free and, available, I'd have that. And that's that you have to build that. And so that was kind of, one of my concerns was I don't have that. And so, now I hope that I have some people that I can count on, or at least a little bit more pull for other people that can vouch for me. And Masada can say, like, if somebody said, hey, is this dude legit? Like, he wants me to come out last minute. And he could say, absolutely, something like that. So, that it's something that happens. I know, and it sucks for the fans. I had a lot of people that were looking forward to meeting Gage, and I'm like, I understand. I was looking forward to it too, but shit happens, man. It doesn't matter if it's life stuff or car accident, car breakdown, airplane trouble, whatever. Shit happens, card subject to change. Every show I've ever been to probably has had something change. So,
yes, no, totally. Dude, GCW in Phoenix, we are always spoiled to changes. I swear our shows are cursed out here sometimes. All right, so we talked a lot about the wrestlers in the show. What was so you had the playing field. Now, what was your approach to structuring the bracket?
There was a little, I hate to say there was a little bias to it. But like I said, Neil and Mike are good friends. And Mike, I originally had wanted to go, a little further. They were the first two that I confirmed. And then after that, it was, Kobayashi. And I know Mike, and Kobayashi is like his hero, his idol, and so I kind of messaged him like funny after I had confirmed with Kobayashi, and I was like, "Hey man, like, how would you feel about going out in the first round?" And he was like, "I guess, like I'd like to go further, but," I was like, "But what if you went out in the first round to Abdullah Kobayashi?" He's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I'm like, yeah, man. Like, no, man, I'm not kidding. Yeah, for real. Like, this is real. And he was just like, I never thought that this match would happen, so I knew that would be cool. Neil has wanted a good match with Masada. If I remember right, he said they had like a 3-way or something like that was, it was okay, but he wanted like a 1-on-1. And they had one at ICW, I'm sorry, but the pit and the pit fighter ones I hate. I like wrestling in a wrestling ring, sorry. The shows are good, and they don't do them anymore that often, but the one he had with Masada, it was like there was like hay bales there, and they're just like, you can't do as much when you're not in a ring, so he kind of had told me like, oh, I'd wanted like a real match. I was like, okay, well, how about we get you in Masada and and do that. And then after that, it was just kind of filling in, who wanted to go where. Hardcore is a crazy dude, and it was just like, I'll do whatever. And he's a good friend of Jeff, the Dad Dies It guy. And I was like, well, who do you want? And he's like, oh, Masada? I was like, okay, we can do you and Masada in the first round. I'm like, he's probably just going to beat the shit out of you and go, pretty quick. And he's like, that's fine with me. Yeah. And I was like, all right, dude, like, cool, man. And then, I have Chuck, and it was going to be Gage, but Chuck and Sage, they killed it. I thought they did great. And I liked having Sage, 2 in a row against Chuck, who's a big dude, like tall, he's not big, but he's a tall dude, and he's a bulky dude, and Masada, who's also a big dude, against this girl who's kind of small, and I like that dynamic, that it just kind of looks cool, especially when she wins. It's like, oh, she just beat that big guy. Like maybe she'll beat this next guy. And obviously that didn't happen with Masada, but yeah. So it was just kind of structuring the rest of it around that, and I think it went well. I think any of those guys I could have, interchanged anything around, and they would have all been great matches. But that was just because we got good people, So yeah, it was a little bit of favoritism and bias, I guess. But I feel like any company does that, so I guess saying that kind of feels shitty. But you don't just put, hey, I'm going to make this guy champion, and people are like, what? I don't know. But yeah, and then just what I think kind of made sense. I also stand by it that from a tournament perspective, I think what I did was, I don't want to say the most interesting, but I think that was the best way that I could have done it. And like I said, not to say any other way would have been bad; they still would have been good. But yeah. So yeah, it's really up to me, and it's funny. Family members and other people that I talk to that aren't as well versed in the wrestling business, they're like, well, how to. I was telling them like, oh, it's going to be this guy, and then in the semifinals it's going to be this, and the finals these two. And they're like, how do you know who's going to be there? I'm like, because I pick the winner, like, because I decide everything. Like that's, sorry, spoiler alert. Like wrestling is predetermined. Like even death matches, So it was just kind of fun to do that, but.
Cool. All right. So we've talked about, the sort of preparation for the show, the inspiration for the company, all that. So now we're at show day. What did that look like for you? Were you able to enjoy it at all, or was it just like work, work, work?
I enjoyed it a little bit. I enjoyed the process, everything. But I did not get to watch much of it at the time. I was kind of running all over the place. It was getting stuff ready for the next matches and checking with people, just making sure everything's good. So there was a couple matches I missed entirely. There was a couple matches I got to see, parts of. The finals, I sat down in the little back row behind people and watched because, like you said, to my very good friend and like I said, the best ever Masada, going at it. I'm like, I'm watching this. I don't care. Whatever anybody else needs, like take it a 10-minute break and then we'll figure it out. But and in the end, we didn't really have to, anything else. There's no matches coming up after anything. So, yeah, but it was very hectic, but it was cool. I like that environment. I like not necessarily being in charge, but just making decisions. People come to you and say, hey, where's this going? Or, hey, what should I be doing like this? And you can kind of tell people, hey, go this way, go that way, do this, put that over there. Hey, can you, throw some tacks on that bat? Hey, can you, go out there and, go grab this guy? Just being able to, kind of direct everyone. And that kind of goes to my like movie, desire. I never cared about being an actor. I never wanted to be an actor, but I would love to be a director. I love to write, and being behind the scenes kind of thing. So it kind of translated well into wrestling, being a promoter, a booker, or whatever you want to call it, that you get to make those decisions and everyone else that had, the support, the crew, the ring guys, the production team, the video team, they're all, seasoned people. So when they would come to me, like, I understand that, usually it's, hey, whatever the promoter wants, whatever the booker wants, and maybe down the road, it'll be more my decision. But when they're like, hey, how do you want these lights? I'm like, you were the pro. Make it look how you think it should look. Where do you want the ring? Like, I don't know, man, you guys put up rings all the time. Like, what do you think works best in this room? What's going to be best for the flow? And it's nice to be able to have people that know what they're doing, that you can trust with some of those decisions, but also kind of assign them things to say, hey, do this. So I had a lot of those. I had a lot of family and friends there that were, helping out, and they are not, I only have maybe two of my friends are wrestling fans, and my wife, knows quite a bit because I talk constantly about wrestling and make her watch things, deathmatch stuff that she's like, oh yeah, that's great. So it's hard to tell people that don't know anything about wrestling stuff, and trying to like get that idea of like, this is in my head, getting it out and dictating it to people. So yeah, I enjoyed the process, and we had a little bumps in the road here and there, but I'm sure well-established wrestling companies have issues like that. So
what was your take on getting this show out there, distributing it through YouTube and having it air? Because there's tons of promotions that don't even do that. But for your first go round, you had it out there, which is linked, by the way, on the Cage Match profile for everybody out there if you want to check the show out. Yeah, so check that out. But what was your thinking on that?
Again, it kind of goes back to my, core thing is for the fans. Maybe in the future we'll be on IWTV or something like that. I get, that views like that are money. You get money for everybody that watches it. Or if you do like an actual pay-per-view type of thing. But this being our first show, I guess I just didn't want to make any barrier or any excuse for somebody not to watch it. If somebody was like, why should I, pay $10 or $5 or whatever to this company I've never heard of, for a show that I don't know if it's going to be any good or not. Like, no, I wanted everyone to see it and be able to just watch it and make their own decision. If they said, hey, fuck those guys, they sucked, that wasn't that good, whatever, at least I wouldn't have anyone angry and like, oh, you owe me $10, that kind of thing. And like I said, just to make it available for anyone, IWTV, we did reach out initially to them, and they kind of told us like, hey, if you're a new company, like, we don't usually work with them. We need you to like do a show and have something to show of it, before we make the investment, because they have to fly people out for a show and equipment and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, totally understand. We'll get a local crew here. We got Kingslayer Productions to do it, and they're fucking great. And so so they did it, and I was like, hey, we're gonna do, don't quote me on this because it's already been almost 2 months, month and a half. I want to do a DVD because I'm a huge physical media fan for anything. I love movies, and I've got a huge shelf of deathmatch DVDs and stuff. So I want to do a DVD. I'm just it's still working on getting some people paid off. Everyone from the show is paid off. It's people that loaned me money for the show that are still being paid back. So I'm just kind of chipping away at it a little at a time here and there. And so I've got ideas for the DVD. So we're gonna do that, and then that'll obviously sell. That'll be money. But that also costs something. But yeah, no, like I said, I just, maybe in the future we'll do that if we can get on IWTV. That's behind a little bit of a paywall there for IWTV, but whatever. I think doing our first show and giving it to people for free, you hook them, maybe it's a drug dealer tactic or something. You get them hooked, and then that's when they come back, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to show everyone. I'm super fucking proud of what we accomplished, all of us, everyone on the show. I'm super happy with how everything turned out, and I want everyone to see it. And I don't want anyone to have an excuse to say like, hey, if I don't have 2 hours of my life to watch it, okay, like, I get that. But, I don't want anyone to say, oh, I can't afford it. I know times are tough, man. Shit sucks. There are times where I'm like, ooh, $10, I can't. Sorry. So I didn't want anyone to have to run into that. I wanted everyone to be able to just watch the show. So
it's awesome. Yeah, and like, throughout the whole show too, something that I appreciated was that it felt like there was an actual evolution to the weapons being used. Like, if I'm not mistaken, glass was not introduced until the final or the last first round match. So you really built up to, bigger spots, bigger reactions. And again, for a first time show, when you notice that stuff, it's like, damn, this is just a great deathmatch show. It doesn't feel like a first show. It feels like a deathmatch spectacle. So, And, we eventually get to Kobayashi versus Neil in the semifinals. First time ever, which I didn't realize it at the time, but so sick. And probably one of the best death matches I've ever seen live. What was the overall response to this one like? Like, has this one like sort of broken through into like the death match groups and stuff? And also like one of the craziest injuries I've ever seen live, if not the craziest, Kobayashi's arm. Like in a situation like that, what happens?
Yeah. So we had an EMT that was supposed to be there, but he kind of canceled on us, and I don't not no blame to him. He's an EMT. They got schedules that change day to day. So I had one of the production guys come up to me before and was like, "Do you have any kind of like medical staff or anything?" I'm like, "No." We know my wife has gone through some medical training and stuff. She's in the medical field. I've had plenty of medical stuff myself throughout my life. And all the guys, they're pretty good at stitching each other up or closing wounds and whatnot. We were, I think, 2 miles from a major hospital. So, I'm like, if something happens, God forbid, knock on wood, we can put some pressure on something, wrap something up, and we got a half dozen cars here that can be out in minutes, or if we need to call an ambulance. And so, luckily it was, it looked pretty gnarly, but it wasn't, it's too severe. It was deep. It was a big cut on his arm. But I don't think he even got stitches. He just like, oh, I'm good. Like, wrap it up. And so, it was scary for me because I was running around and I was in the back getting ready for the next one. I really wanted to be there to watch it live because, like I said, Neil, my friend, and Kobayashi, my favorite, and I had to be in the back. And JD Horror came around the side. He's like, "Kobayashi's cut bad." And I was like, "Oh, fuck. Like, what?" And so I got over there and saw, like, it's his arm. And I was like, "Oh, thank God." Which, it's still scary. I mean, there's shit in there that, it could have fucked him up really bad. But luckily it was, mostly just skin, thick skin over there. And so we went out in the back and everyone was gathered around. But Sage and I really were the two, like, we threw on some gloves and we, kind of pulled these shards out, and I actually still have a few of the shards that were inside his arm, and they were big ass pieces of glass. And I'm gonna put them like in a little plastic or a glass tube and put them on my shelf, but because I'm fucking weird like that. Yeah, so we did that and wrapped him up, cleaned it out, wrapped him up, and he was good. He wanted to go home and go back to the motel and took a shower and cleaned it up again and wrapped it up, and he was good to go. We went to the aquarium the next day and shooting the day after that. So yeah, he he was good. But yeah, it was a scary situation. I'm very glad nobody else got hurt worse, and it's just one of those freak things, light tubes, man. Nick Gage, at Tournament of Death, it was like that. I've watched that clip back of Neil splashing him several times, and I'm like, how did that even happen? And It looks like maybe a piece came up when Neil was coming back down, and he like kneaded into him or something. I don't know, but I'm so thankful that the injury we had was as minor as that was, but it was still scary. And so, but he took it like a champ. He sat out there and was like, he smoked a cigarette and like, no pain, like, pull it out, wrap it up. I'm like, all right, dude, like, let's go.
Some people are just built different. Holy shit. Yeah, I personally would have been like, can you please take me the 2 miles to the hospital?
Right.
All right, so the finals, right? Masada, Neil Diamond Cutter, like probably one of the most classic feeling American deathmatch bouts that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier you talked about this like at the beginning of the interview, but kind of watching something weekly versus analyzing it is like the finished product, right? So watching this show live, it was very exciting. Neil was definitely the underdog to Masada, right? But analyzing it from the end, especially with you gifting Neil the title and stuff, and Neil retiring soon, this really feels almost like a Neil Diamond Cutter like tribute show in a way, in terms of like the matches he was given. like his booking and everything. Like, what was there like actual thought behind it like that?
Hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would love
Yeah,
to hear about that.
yeah, definitely a little bit. Like I said, I've known Neil for, I want to say 8 years now. I actually met him at a wrestling show in Mesa, Arizona. It was a company called Party Hard Wrestling, and he used to wrestle there. I used to go all the time, and I just saw like one time that it was like Neil Diamond Cutter. I'm like, hold on, like Prince of the Deathmatch, Neil Diamond Cutter, like, or is this somebody else just with the name? And I went to the show, and sure enough, there he is. And I was like, are you Neil Diamond Cutter, like the Neil Diamond Cutter? And he's like, well, where do you know me from? Like, I'm like, Prince of the Deathmatch, dude. He's like, oh my god, like finally somebody that knows like what I actually like to do, and deathmatch shit, because everyone here just knows him from his like kind of funny gimmicky stuff he did here in Arizona for a while. And and so we just continued to talk and different stuff and over chat. And I took him and Mike, or I actually, we went to a show in Tucson. Casanova Valentine was doing his no ring deathmatch stuff, and he did like a 3-way, him, Mike Kruger, and Neil Diamond Cutter at this bar in Tucson. So I drove Neil down and back up, and then we went to, oh God, was it Crimson Crown? It was a tournament that Michael Kruger won. I can never remember which one it was, but in California. And so we carpooled, the three of us, Neil, him, and I, and carpooled there and did the show and came back. And so just little stuff like that. We hung out, we'd talk, play video games together, all this. And so he's just become like a really good friend. Not even like, oh, he's my favorite wrestler or anything like that. I didn't even like think of him in that terms anymore. It would just be, I'd watch a show and message him and like, hey dude, like fucking killed it tonight, or hey, did you see this? Stuff like that. And so when that started coming around, and he had announced, this is going to be my last year. And I was like, what, it was kind of part of it. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want Neil to be a part of it, and I got to do it now because he's going to be gone. And so it felt a little bit like that. I didn't initially plan it to be like that, but once we got Kobayashi, I felt like, not trying to be, I don't know, I want to say dick, but Masada has had a match with Kobayashi before in the past, and so I was like, okay, well, how I had it set up, I'm like, let's do Neil, and that works out for the finals. And Neil, is obviously like, oh shit, yeah. So it did kind of end up being that, almost like that. And I didn't want to market it that way. I specifically stayed away from, saying anything about Neil's retirement tour or him, retiring at the end of the year, or this might be his last deathmatch tournament, or, anything like that. I didn't want to make it seem like that it was a shoe-in for him to win or something, that like, come see him, in his last deathmatch tournament, which I think he did 2 after me, so it didn't matter anyways. But yeah, no, it was definitely, I feel like, he's been so good to me and so helpful and so anything that, I definitely wanted to show him some fucking gratitude and some respect, and he deserves it. I mean, he's a phenomenal worker. He's a fucking great dude, and he's great. So it was kind of a Neil Diamond Cutter tribute show, but I think everyone got a nice light on them in that show. I don't think anyone went under the radar or went unappreciated or anything. The crowd was very hot on everyone, all the matches. So yeah.
Yeah, something else that I thought was really cool. I looked it up before the show, but Neil was actually 0-2 against Masada, even though it's the pit, right? He's still 0-2 against him. So I thought that, especially with his career coming to an end, it's cool that he gets the win over Masada finally as well.
Yes.
So again, just like really great storytelling stuff. And dude, okay, you definitely put Neil over big, because I want to talk about this fucking trophy you gave him. You gave Neil probably the best looking deathmatch trophy. Dylan, if you can, James, at some point, just post a picture of it in this
Okay.
chat, and we will put it in like the episode thumbnail or whatever, because
Okay.
every single element of this trophy was infused with deathmatch somehow. Light tube pillars, barbed wire, like it was fucking amazing, dude. What was the design process?
I was really inspired by, Tournament of Death used to do that. The one, I want to say it's the one Kasai one, I don't remember, but they had like a saw blade on it and some barbed wire and whatever. I always thought it was really cool, and so we started looking around for trophies, and my mom actually was just at like one of her friend's house. And her friend's like, "Oh, didn't you know I used to own a trophy store and I have a garage full of trophies?" And she's like, "No." And so this lady lets her in there, and my mom finds this trophy, and it's a baseball trophy. And so if you look close at it, you'll see when I post a picture of it, it's the like pillar supports are baseball bats. And so I was like, hey, that kind of works for, we'll put like gussets on one and tack strips on another and wrap these in barbed wire. And I took the little baseball guy off the top, so it's just like a cup. But, I was like, oh, this is, kind of cool. So I liked that idea of, making it like deathmatch specific, but, it didn't want to go too crazy with it. And I initially had planned to do like a southern, or not southern, but southwest kind of theme. I was going to do like, wanted to do like a rattlesnake or scorpions or something, but they all just looked so like lame. I like painted some gold, like plastic ones, obviously not real ones, but I like painted them gold and put them in. I'm just like, it looks so tacky. I'm like, fuck it, let's just make it a deathmatch trophy. So, and then the title as well was the same kind of thing. My absolute favorite title of all time is the second generation BJW Deathmatch Championship. When Ito put the like barbed wire spider web on it, I just thought that was the coolest fucking thing. I think it looks so rad. And so I had my brother make a little barbed wire Arizona cutout shape, and then I did like a broken light tube. It's actually just a PVC pipe with a piece of light tube glued on the bottom, and then the tacks, the gusset, the stuff, and then the duct tape that just says AZ Deathmatch Champion. Like I like that it looks janky. It's on purpose. If I wanted and I just saw on one of the groups that DJ for CCW is doing the Ultraviolent Championship again, and they have a new design, and it looks really cool, but it's just like, it's too clean for me. Like I don't want to, I'm still a super mark. I've got a replica of the BJW, the current BJW Championship. That's the one that Kobayashi had at his table at the show. I was like, hey, I've got a replica of this. Do you want me to bring it so you can take photos? He's like, yeah. And I've got a replica of the ICW American Deathmatch Championship and the GCW Ultraviolent Championship. I just think they're cool, and I decided to go like a little different with my belt, and obviously funds were something. I got a $80 Pakistani bootleg of a WWE Intercontinental title and painted it black over it, welded some shit on it, taped some shit to it, and made my own. So I don't know, I just think it looks cool. It reminds me also the WWE, WWF, whatever you call it, hardcore title, that just like got progressively shittier over time. It was all duct taped together, and I loved it. I love the idea, the like, hey, take this broken title and and make it into something else. Like I said, I just didn't want like a clean, nice title. I wanted something that looked like it's been through some shit. So but it was hard to do with the first show. So but Neil wiped his bloody face on it, so in the middle it's just got this big blood splatter across the duct tape.
If anything, that just adds to it. That is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man, so like, what is next for Arizona Deathmatch Company? Any special announcements we could drop right now? Anything like that? But yeah, just what's the future looking like?
Nothing super special. I wish I could, drop some bombshell or something. We're 100% intending to do the show like annually. So, next year at the same time, ideal world, we'll be doing another one, and probably early middle of next year we'll have more information. I don't think we're going to announce it like 8 months ahead of time like we did this time, but yeah, we're definitely doing more shows. I'd like to do like a smaller show that's not a tournament. I had an idea to do kind of like almost like a tour of Arizona. It's just hard to there's not deathmatch wrestlers here. There's a couple of guys down in Tucson that reached out to me, Outrage and his son, who locally are well known, and I'd love to have them and a couple other guys, but it's just a logistic matter of everything else, getting the ring, getting this. So I ideally I wanted to do like. There's so many small towns, and Arizona's huge. That was something I forgot I wanted to say earlier when we were talking about traveling for wrestling shows. Like I was blowing my friend's mind. He lives in Massachusetts, and we went there and went to his house, and we went down to Tournament of Survival, and it's just like a 6-hour drive, I want to say, to New Jersey, and we go through Connecticut and New York and something else, and I'm like, shit, dude, like in the valley in Phoenix area, like you can drive 4 hours any direction and still be in Arizona. It's a huge state. Like obviously there are bigger states, but on the West Coast here, all of our states are so big. So LA is a 6-hour drive from Phoenix. Where I live kind of eastern Arizona up in the mountains. It's a 3-hour drive to the valley. So going to California from where we live is 9 hours away. So that was, we went to King of the Death matches when Circle 6 did that first one, just to kind of bucket list it off. And it was like, oh, it's cool, but God, that drive was horrible. And so anyway, I'm like, there are places that have never had a wrestling show here, and if we're going to be Arizona's first deathmatch company, we're going to do the Valley's first deathmatch tournament. Like, why don't we try to do some, this place's first deathmatch company or tournament, or not tournament, geez, show, this place. So I wanted to do kind of like a tour of like doing, these smaller towns or up around here, or northern Arizona, southern Arizona. And do some deathmatch shows, even if they were like 4 matches, but it's just about, money and time and getting everyone together to do it. So, that's all stuff I'm still learning from the last show, the first show, the last show, figuring out all the logistics of stuff. But yeah, we're definitely doing more shows, and I just don't know at this point when and where they will be, but we're definitely doing more.
All right, I got 2 more questions for you. This one, we're going to go rapid fire. This is my pitch for 5 guys to bring in for future shows, and I just want your thoughts on them. So number 1, Daiju Wakamatsu.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would love to bring, there's several people from Japan, there's several people from Japan that I would love to bring over. Yeah. Yeah.
Number 2, Emerson Jane.
Yeah.
Number 3. Oh, sorry, please.
No, I didn't know if you were looking for like more than like yes or no, or you said rapid fire. I was like, yeah.
No, as much as you would like to share, please.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. And that was something, I'll tell you, that is one thing that I actually kind of thought of. Don't hold me to it, but I was thinking of, hey, how do we top last year, or well, this year, but for next year? So I was kind of thinking like, we did it. Why don't we do an all-female deathmatch tournament? And I know, Queen of the Deathmatch has existed, Goddess of Gore existed, several of those. But again, we can, for billing purposes, hey, this is Arizona's first all-female deathmatch tournament. And, there's lots of people that I would love to have in that, though, the field of women deathmatch wrestlers is quite a bit smaller. And, for the record, 2 of my favorites have retired in the past, like, couple of years, Casey Kirk and Sawyer Wreck. And so I was like, damn, okay. But yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of people, and there's a few that are, dipping their feet into the deathmatch stuff from regular stuff. So, Yeah, I mean, anyone that is willing and wants to try it, I'd love to have some people that are less, not less well known, but you know what I mean, less deathmatch savvy, you know, to show that they, you know, can do it and would like to do it. So,
Dude, after this, I gotta send you my mixtape website because I just released. It's like a pro wrestling mixtape, right? I do these Blu-rays. They're basically like pro wrestling criterions, and
nice.
I did the design myself, print the Blu-rays, everything, etc. Disc art, insert booklet, etc. And I just did one that's an all women's deathmatch tournament, just using pre-existing matches.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's called Ice Queen, and I feel like,
Huh.
especially as a physical media person, you'd fucking dig it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
send it to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Send me it.
All right, number 3, Orin Veidt.
Yeah. I like. I've never met Oren. I saw him King of the Deathmatch. I have been kind of critical of him in the past for some stuff, but you know, it kind of, I want to say, evolved as a person myself. You know, that, like I was saying about, you know, just wanting everyone to enjoy it. You know, one of my favorite people in the world is Kevin Smith, the director, actor, you know, Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob, all that kind of stuff. And you know, he has some really good words about, like, why would you be negative about somebody else's art, you know, like when you can just like shut up, you know, like what good does it do to be negative, you know, like. And so I've, like I said, I've kind of grown as a person and thought, you know, like, oh, I don't like this person's style or this aspect of this person. Well, like, I don't need to go on the internet and fucking bitch about it. You know, I could just say, okay, cool, and move on with my life. And so I've tried to do that lately. And so I appreciate Oren a little bit more. Like I said, I'm not trying to, like, oh, I have any beef or anything like that. No, it was stupid shit that, you know, that I was just trying to find somebody to hate, you know, and I've moved on from that. So watching his stuff, I've watched his matches for years, and he's a great wrestler, and I would love to have him on a show.
Yeah, him versus, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm about to say this name. Such a blast from the past. G-Raver, 400 Degrees, GCW.
Yeah.
That was like the match that got me into like deathmatch wrestling. So like 6-7 years ago. Okay, number 4, Yusaku Ito.
Don't know. Maybe don't know that name.
Current BJW Deathmatch champion.
Oh,
he
duh,
is,
Jesus.
yeah, bald guy.
I was like, I was thinking of Ito, and I'm like, wait, oh yeah, duh, brain fart there. Yes, yeah. Like I said, of Japan, anyone, any you know, BJW freedoms type people that, you know, I could possibly get, I would love to have. Yeah, anyone, especially when you got like a lineage like the BJW Deathmatch Championship. That, yeah, I'd take him.
Dude, and you can bring yours in for any of them to do photo ops now too. So you already got that. All right, last one. This is Wrestle Update's own, multiple time Nello's Wrestler of the Year, Hoodfoot.
Hoodfoot, yeah. Oh yeah, I love Hoodfoot. He's a very impressive guy. God, there's so many like ones that I could think of. I think it was him and Cruel at ICW when he like Cruel threw him into like the wall, and there was just this like blood splatter outline of a face and hand. So fucking good. But that dude, he bleeds like a motherfucker. Like he I would love that. I love, you know, I love bloody death matches, and I know that, yeah, like it's dangerous, obviously, but these guys, they know what they're doing. But when they are just bloody at the end of it, I'm like, there we fucking go. You know, I hate seeing a death match where somebody's just got like a little trickle, you know, at the end. In a tournament, it's a little bit different to me because, you know, yeah, you got to get through, and this, you can't just go all fucking crazy every single round. But when it's like a regular show and it's just one match, I'm like, how can you go, even if it's, you know, you're trying to do it on purpose and it's not working, you know, like breaking tubes over each other and it's not, I'm like, fucking bleed, do something, you know, like get some blood flowing, you know, like you just went through all these light tubes and you're not even like bleeding that much. Like, yeah. But yeah, no, Hoodfoot, great. I would love to have him on a show.
Oh yeah. All right. Last question
Well, hey,
for me.
I've got some
Sorry, Dylan.
ideas first. I wanted to save you for the main event, though. I want to give you the grand finale. So I
All
wanted to
good.
jump. I wanted to jump in real quick for you, James. Uh, so like, and it's something I've been thinking about when we were talking about Kobayashi. You had an incredible deep cut on the V2 deathmatch title for Big Japan, um,
Mhm.
which was awesome. Like that brought back so many memories. That's my personal favorite era of death matches because Big Japan at that time period was just like, we have so little money, we're just gonna bring random stuff to the arena and make it a death match, and we're gonna call it something else, like Piranha death match,
Yeah.
the Cactus death match. It's something I wish that we had more of nowadays in general, like really creative stuff like that. Um, but just all of that stuff, and you were talking about, like, you were a huge fan of the Japanese style. Nello, you brought up Emerson Jane, who we're both big fans of, and we're all big fans of. But I was going to ask you what you thought about maybe checking out, or like not checking out, but bringing in, if you have interest in running, like, Lucha Extrema style shows on
Mhm.
either, the side of the border with the luchadors that specialize in the deathmatch style. Obviously, I think most people listening to this would know Los Macizos, but there's also, plenty of people like that, like Arrow Boy. I think he was even
Yeah.
on that Tournament of Death show you talked about.
Yeah, yeah, he
Earlier.
was on that one. Him and Masada in the first round was great. Yeah, Arrow Boy. There's several, and I'm
Yeah.
not so great on them, the Mexican deathmatch scene. Just I see what I can from like Zona 23 and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't see as much out there available to watch, and so it's kind of harder to keep up with. But yeah, I know several of those guys like Crazy King, and I guess he's been in Freedoms for a while, but Violento Jack, is fucking great. Yeah, I absolutely. That's another one that's been kind of in my head that what we could get from Mexico being so close that I'd love to have like an either all Mexico show or like a Mexico versus US or something like that. I think that there's a lot of potential there. There's just a lot of potential for everything, and I do kind of to go with what you were saying about the Japanese style of kind of crazy shit. I miss those times, and not that you need like a whole storyline or anything, but just something as simple as like that Tournament of Death I was talking about. It's BJW versus CZW, and like, here we're gonna do Zona versus Arizona, something like that. We're gonna do,
Oh, that's a great idea.
yeah, right. We're gonna that's what I was thinking about, and like, even I had an idea, and I'm sure lots of people have had it, and like I've seen people talk about it like a death match, like World Cup almost kind of thing. And even if it was just an 8-man show, if you could get like 2 people from Mexico, 2 people from the US, 2 people from Japan, 2 people from England, or whatever, Europe, some kind of Europe, whatever, and just like there's some kind of something more than just 2 guys thrown into a match for no reason. And not that I don't enjoy those as well, and it just feels like if you can put something at stake, if you
Yeah.
can have more than just like, hey, I like that guy, I'm that way. If somebody's from Arizona, I'm rooting for you. I don't care what it is, if it's fucking America's Got Talent or a team, a football team, I don't care about the Cardinals. Sorry, I just don't care about football. But if they're in the Super Bowl, I'm going to root for them. It's the home team, kind of thing. So if you can put that into something, where somebody that is from your walk of life or from your, country or your state or your whatever, that you can have that a little bit more on the line, that you could be like, oh shit, I'm from England. I really want this person to win this match because they're also from England, something like that. So it just anything to get you, the viewer, to have a little more investment in a match, is I think, important, and it's that little bit extra. So yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
those are all awesome ideas. Arizona versus Zona just writes itself.
Right. I know. I even thought of like that you could do like ARI, ARI and little, and then the Zona, with like the Zona 23, but do like Zona 25 or something, or 26, I guess maybe next year. But yeah, no, that's something that, like I, would love to explore in the future. And I'm open to working with anyone. And kind of like what I said earlier, when somebody was like, well, what if, what if somebody's coming here, or a company here starts doing it, like, do it, please. I will fucking be there. I will be there front row. I will help out in any way I can. I will, one that I've wanted for a while is ICW No Holds Barred to come here. GCW has been here several times. No Holds Barred has not been here, and I would love for them to. I'm not gonna oh, they're stepping on my territory or my toes. Like, that shit is so so in the past. There's not territories. There's not anything like that. The chances are if you're doing something, somebody's done it before you. You're not the first. And so yeah, anything that any company that's like, hey, we want to expand out that way. We want to, Loco Wrestling in Texas. I'm a big fan of. I'd love to, hey, if they ever wanted to come this way, and do something, I'd love to help Crimson Crown and California. Like, I'd love to, do a joint show with them here, and something bring more of their people and more of those West Coast, California people here. Because I'm sure I can in the future, but it'd be cool to get some of those dudes like BC Killer and them. That I like them. And they don't, I think, get a lot of representation because they kind of almost live in like their own bubble over here. We don't really like cross over too much. It's weird, and I don't know if it's just because it's a hell of a drive or a hell of a plane ride, from one side of the country to the other. And there's just a huge talent pool to begin with, so it's got to be really hard when you've got all these fucking fantastic guys in the tri-state area in Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania and whatever, or Michigan or Ohio or Indiana or whatever, and then to well, why should we bring somebody from the other side of the country, over here when we can pick from these guys, and I think that sucks, but I understand it, from that perspective. So yeah, but anyway, sorry. I talk a lot and I just rant. So I apologize if I'm going too long. Just cut me off. But
I'm a man after my own heart, James. Do not feel bad
right.
about that at all.
No, I love it. I love it all. I love deathmatch. I love everything. I love supporting companies. I don't shit on anyone. I might, make jokes about this or that, or make jokes to someone, or little things like this. But I feel like there's in this business of wrestling stuff, I feel like you don't have loyalty, like, if that makes sense, as a fan. Sorry. There's nothing that says like I need to watch every GCW show. I watch them when I can. I watch whatever shows, but I do look at the card and see like, is this interesting? Is this stuff I like? If it's a GCW show that doesn't have a bunch of death matches, I might just watch one match of it. And sorry, that's shitty, but that's what I'm interested in. Or if I'm bored, I'll put it on. But anyways, the point is, they just it's you can like the people, like the promotion. I feel like is secondary. If there's a bunch of wrestlers that I love on a show, I'm gonna watch it. I don't care whose it is, but I don't say like I'm gonna watch every GCW show, every RPW show just because it's RPW. Like, no, I watch most of them because they put on fucking banger shows. So yeah, I feel like in the deathmatch world or wrestling world in general, like you kind of become fans of the wrestlers themselves rather than like the promotion, and I felt that way with WWE and AEW too. Like I don't feel like there's any reason to be, on one side or the other. Like, no, I want to watch Mox, fall on a nail board, cool. I'm going to watch that on AEW. I want to watch John Cena, win his historic 17th world championship. Like, I'm going to watch that on WWE. Like, I don't care where it happens. Like, I just want to see shit, so yeah, but that's just something that kind of is my philosophy about, the company here, the Arizona Deathmatch Company, that, I want to show people things they want to see. I don't expect any kind of blind faith, blind, support from people that are just like, it's my, hometown, or, oh, it's the only option. Like, no, I want to support people,
And don't you think there's more of that? I mean, I guess we're kind of getting into opinions here, but something I think that's really changed over the years, especially from like back then, when I was first getting started, is like a big thing now. And you've seen it with a lot of these WWE people that have gotten released recently, that if they're a certain type of person, they grew up on a lot of this stuff. It's not like it was 20 years ago where they only watched WWE or now it's like we've been around so much with the internet where a lot of the wrestlers, maybe they backyard wrestled, we talked about that. I mean, someone like Will Ospreay had a backyard background and he's one of the biggest stars. There's been people that were loving CZW, especially, of that era, the CZW and ROH feud, was beloved by so many people that became wrestlers. And I think now you're seeing much more of like, people I knew was like, if they were a big star in WWE and then they were on an indie show, it was always guys who were there for the paycheck. Pretty much.
Right.
Like they were just trying to stretch things out from that old school 80s, 90s class, and they didn't know what else to do, so they just were there for the paycheck. But now you're seeing people get released. I mean, God, look at people like, Priscilla Kelly, Shotzi that were in the indies before. They'll do random shows all over the place just because they love this shit. And we're seeing more and more of that now. And I think that's only helpful to a promotion like yours, which is everything you've said is built on, like Nello mentioned with Mark Briscoe, the love of the game.
Right.
I guess one more question. Well, two more. I have one more after that. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, is there anybody you think out here that's coming around the corner or on the scene now that's maybe has not done a death match, or maybe they just don't do it regularly, that you think would be great in a death match setting, that you might think, hey, so and so, if they wanted to jump in, I might want to get them on the show, the type of situation?
Not really. No one comes to mind immediately. Are you talking like WWE like that, or just like indie?
Anywhere. Yeah, no matter who it is.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to try to work on here. Again, it's just figuring it out as I go along. But I'm like, I don't, I know how certain people got into deathmatch wrestling as a worker, so how does everyone else? Is it, say here in Arizona, I know there are a couple guys that do deathmatch wrestling, and I know there's a couple guys that have done some, hardcore stuff, or maybe, a death match or a pseudo death match, whatever you want to call it. But, because it's not widely available here, or readily available here, I should say, in Arizona, is that the reason they don't do it? Like, okay, well, I want them to know that, like, hey, please, reach out to me, or say something that, hey, if you're an Arizona wrestler and you want to try deathmatch or get into deathmatch, like, hit me up and we'll see. I don't have anyone specifically that I would poach or, try to poach, because I feel like deathmatch is just such a specialized, like, form that it's not something that, I could say. I know one of the most popular ones, and he's, a big WWE and, TNA, everybody, is Jeff Hardy. For years, everyone's like, oh, dude, Jeff Hardy would have killed it as a deathmatch wrestler. Like, yeah, but he wouldn't, be the person he is today, and that's cool. But, when you, it still comes down to their personal thing. Jeff Hardy's going to jump off this ladder, or he's going to do this. Yeah, but does he want to fall on broken glass? Does he want to roll around in barbed wire? Does he want to get skewered by Masada? That kind of shit. So that's where I feel like, obviously you're not talking about like forcing anyone to do a death match, but I'd love to say that oh, I think this person would be a great deathmatch wrestler, but like, man, who knows? Like, oh, I'm afraid of blood. I faint when I see blood. I don't want to be stuck by things. I'm afraid of needles, that kind of stuff. So, I would hate to I'm not trying to dodge the question. I already said, like, I don't want to, say anybody specific, but
yeah.
I'd hate to put that pressure on, somebody because of how dangerous and how, life altering deathmatch can potentially be. I mean, regular wrestling can be, you can get hurt and fucked up in an instant, but, deathmatch kind of adds that extra thing on there. So I'd hate to say like, oh man, you'd be a great deathmatch wrestler to somebody and like, oh, I should. And then they not like it or something happen or whatever. So I feel like if somebody wants to pursue that, then they should, and I'd love to explore those avenues with any local wrestlers in Arizona or surrounding areas that want to come here and do a death match. Like I'd love to have that. I'd love to give people those opportunities if they want them.
No, I totally appreciate that, man. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. Like you said, this form really takes heart. You have to really want it to do it. Yeah, so I totally get where you're coming from on that. But yeah, I want to throw it to Nello now. I'm sorry I jumped on you a little bit. You had your big question at the end, but I wanted to save you for the end.
Hey, dude, that's fine. I don't feel like I have a main event question, so it's just more of a fun one to end it on.
I was trying to hype you up, man.
I know, and here I go.
I know the burning question everyone has is my favorite color is green. So
yeah, exactly. Okay,
there you go.
So much.
Interview sealed. Done. No.
Over with. So like the way you've described it, it sounded like Kobayashi was kind of like your white whale for the show, right?
Yeah.
And so for the next show, right? Like not like don't have to consider money or like logistics or anything like that. Like what is like it doesn't even have to be a wrestler. Like you said, it could be the fact that you're doing like an international GP or World Cup or something, right? But what would be your white whale for the next Arizona Deathmatch Company show?
Yeah, I feel like it's so corny to say, like foreign people, because they are, to us and to, the opposite way, us to a different country, it's just a more of a spectacle and a less common spectacle. There's tons of Japanese guys that I respect immensely and that I would love. And, I know they're still going strong, but there's a couple guys that are, they've been doing it a while and who knows how much longer they're doing it. There's some guys in England and that are blowing up or, have blown up or are great that I would love to have here. I'd have to, if I had to pick a single person, it'd have to be Jun Kasai. I mean, he's, in my opinion, the greatest ever in the world. Masada is absolutely the best American deathmatch wrestler ever. Jun Kasai is the best deathmatch wrestler of all time, in my opinion. And I've heard stories, I won't name any companies or anything, but I've heard stories that he's had issues with accommodations with how people treated him and that coming to America, and I would love to rectify that and show him like, hey, we're cool over here, like no shade to anyone else, but I've heard that and I don't have any solid confirmation. I've never heard it from him himself. I've never talked to him other than in person at Tournament of Death. But I've heard that he's hesitant to come here, and I don't know if it's just he doesn't like traveling, he doesn't like planes, or if it just bad experiences in the past, have left him soured. But I'd love to be able to have him because like I said, he's the best, and has been doing it for a long time, and like I said, who knows how much longer. And so that I would love to just continue to try to put on, not even like, not that I'm being groundbreaking at all. Like I said, there's already been all female deathmatch tournaments, but just doing things like that we can bring people, especially in Arizona, because that's my focus. I'd love to have like we want to go national or whatever. I kind of squash that a little bit, naming the company Arizona Deathmatch Company. Maybe I should have called it Southwest Deathmatch Company or something. But no, that's what I wanted to focus on, was Arizona, because that's where I'm from. I was born and raised here. Absolutely love my state, and and I feel like we're a big enough market for wrestling that there's enough people here that can appreciate it. And with the magic of the internet, everyone can watch our shit. It's not like we're, territory days where you only see it here, but it's that in-person experience, that deathmatch is just, if you've never been to a deathmatch show, it is unlike anything else you've ever seen. Even you can go to as many. I've been to 2 different WrestleManias, and I've had more fun at deathmatch shows than those. Not to say WrestleMania was bad; it's fucking amazing. But deathmatch shows, there's just the energy is so much different. The general atmosphere and just everything. And so I want to bring that as my primary goal, is to bring that to the people of Arizona. And so, that means I want to bring them people that they might not otherwise get to see. I had a lot of people say, I never thought I'd get to see a deathmatch show because they haven't, not that they've never left Arizona, but, not everyone can just fly to, the East Coast or to afford the drive to California or wherever it is, so, a lot of people can't travel, and I want to make that easier for people to experience it here, and I think that's cool. I think it's something that, people appreciate, and even if I'm limiting my audience and, something like that, it doesn't bother me, because I appreciate that audience more. Those people, I'm not trying to convert people to deathmatch wrestling. I'm not trying to, get it made into the mainstream. I'm trying to get the people that love and appreciate it to experience it and to be able to experience it.
Oh yeah. When you brought up Kasai, real quick before we get out of here, my brain was like, what would be your dream person to bring in? And out of nowhere, it was like Shuji Ishikawa, because I don't think he's ever come to America, much less wrestled a death match here. And I feel like he's so underrated. He was the fucking man back in the day for BJW.
Right.
Damn,
Yeah.
that would, yeah. Anyway, I digress.
No, I digress.
James, anything else you'd like to say before we get out of here, man? Thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
You
this
guys.
Has been awesome.
No, nothing specific. Just, a big thank you to everyone that has supported us in any way, shape, or form. Sharing things on Facebook is great. Instagram, YouTube, whatever. Anything that gets it out there for more people to experience it. Everyone that showed up to the show, everyone, it's kind words after the show, during the show, seeing people react to it. I'm not even going to lie. When during the show, people started chanting AZ Death Match, I fucking teared up a little bit, because I just, not even trying to, like toot my own horn, but like I fucking, put this together, and I set out to do it. And so it was a personal moment of, like I kind of said in the beginning, I was feeling like in a rut in my life, that I wasn't amounting to anything or doing anything that I can now say, like, here's my fucking mark, that I put this fucking show on, and it's there forever. People will be able to watch it in 100 years or whatever, when I'm long gone, and to have like a room full of people chanting for something that you fucking did, I just thought was like the coolest thing in the world. I've never experienced anything like that before. And so that was very cool for me. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. I want to say thank you to you guys for talking to me, that I'm fucking nobody. I put on, one wrestling show, there's other people that are, way better than me, or more experienced than me, or more knowledgeable than me, and so I appreciate you guys taking your time and having me on and letting me talk and rant and babble on forever. And I'm sorry if that show's way longer than you needed it to be, but I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone, and I always appreciate it. And I always appreciate, any kind of feedback at all. I like constructive criticism. If you want to say like, "Hey, you're a fucking bitch and you suck," that's fine. I'm past that point in my life where I care about things like that. but I love hearing, people message me, and still, now I just had one, I think yesterday, that's like, hey, can I, recommend some people for you to look at? I'm like, absolutely, dude. Like, I want to know. Like, I'm pretty good. I've got my finger on the pulse, pretty well. But if there's something or somebody I'm missing, like, I want to fucking know about it. So, yeah, absolutely. If you had an idea, a suggestion, for any aspect of anything in our stuff, let me know. But yeah, I'm so deeply grateful to the fans, because it doesn't matter. Anything else doesn't matter. If the fans aren't there, then you have nothing. There's no wrestling show. You're putting on a wrestling show for nobody. So the fact that they showed up and showed out and really fucking enjoyed it, I'm forever grateful. So thank you to everyone everywhere.
Thank you, James.
You were great on the show. There's no doubt. We don't care about the time, or anything like that. We have plenty of time. We have all the time in the world. But that is one thing I was thinking about when you're talking about it, the promoter side, because there was. I'm really glad that you ended up at a place where you're like, yeah, we're definitely going to keep this going forward, because in the dark version of all of this, everything could have gone wrong. Nobody shows up. People, maybe there's a backstage fight. Somebody runs away afterwards.
Right.
All kinds of stuff. Maybe the weapons don't. You're not able to put it together. Your family dips out. Something like that. This could have all turned into a horror story of lost money that will never be seen again. But instead, you actually took the risk on it. That's the thing. It's not like you came in with a 100% guarantee that everything came in. So I love your attitude, looking for people to check out, trying to grow. And then you have me that is here to give you great advice on use cactuses on your next show. That's never mind any kind of wrestler that I want you to check out. Just use cactus, just like the old days in Big Japan.
Right.
but no, James, we're gonna put the link to all your stuff, to your Instagram, Facebook, all that on the show. So I hope you got fulfillment out of it that you were looking for from your show, and I can't wait to see AZ Deathmatch continue on for years to come now, man.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that so much.
Of course. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you, James, and thank you, the listeners. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully it's the first of a series we could do in the near future for all of the world of deathmatch wrestling and just wrestling as a whole, because as we go by, whether there's cactuses or no cactuses, it's okay, because I love you. And until next time, this has been your Wrestle Update.